Hey guys, welcome back to the Cultural Shift. This is Velani from Velani Consulting, and I am geeking out about my next guest right now. It's the first time I've had somebody on the show that understands the language of business process management, which is my background where I came from. So I'm super excited to introduce Rowan Teh. Before I bring him on, I just want to let you know Rowan actually designed an intelligent business process management software, a company called Boxfish. And he's been a career consultant for over 20 years in director level positions with global consulting firms in New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, and USA. So he's definitely traveled the world pretty well. I want to bring him on board. How's it going, Rowan?
Oh, awesome! Thanks so much, Faisal. Look, I'm really excited to be on this interview as well, and yeah, someone of your stature and your depth in terms of understanding business process management as well. I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation.
Absolutely. So I want to let the audience know you and I kind of met in a weird circumstance. We were both giving a presentation on Business Transformation and Operational Excellence Summit. I think you spoke about BPM in general, and I spoke about digital transformation. And that's how you and I connected, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
tell,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about why is that such a big passion for you, business process?
Look, I think my background, my qualification has always been more on the business side of actually understanding business management and how a business actually works.
Mhm.
When I started off my career, I was really my entry point was about technology. It was implementing ERP systems actually.
Mhm.
But through all the different projects that I worked on, I just found that the common factor of change, regardless of the system that I was dealing with, was always about processes. At the end of the day, that's how a business functions. So my it started growing inside me that look, it doesn't matter what kind of transformation I'm working on, whether it's technology based, organization, or people change. Processes is fundamentally the thing that is always the same in terms of the impact of the business. So that I guess ignited in me. I just want to know more about processes. I want to know how to effectively transform processes, and how do businesses tick. So that's kind of my passion. And early 2000, I kind of got qualified in Lean Six Sigma as a methodology.
Yeah.
And what I found fascinating about Lean, especially, was that when I got into it, it was almost the second evolution of Lean. So
Yeah.
Lean was not new. It got introduced back in the early 90s. And it sort of came back for a second time in the 2000 period because it was all about applying Lean to services. And
Yeah.
then,
Worked in manufacturing before.
correct, and manufacturing before. And like 20 years later, after I started working on Lean, um, Lean still hasn't gone away. It's been the fundamental foundations for new approaches like Agile or DevOps if you work in the IT world. So one way or the other, it works. And it doesn't matter which company I work with. A lot of those principles are fundamentally still effective today. So that's kind of my passion in it. I feel like it's an area that keeps evolving and keeps me interested.
Yeah, I talk to people all the time about different areas of growth, and the one thing that I have found that's a pattern in everything is the basics never change, right? The basics to anything are always the same. You always build on top of it, and I think that's the best part about Lean. Even though it was designed for the manufacturing industry, the basics that it was designed with can be used within any industry at this particular point in time because we're also process driven, right? The
Yes.
more technology comes out and the more that people are taken out of the equation, the more processes have to be developed to make sure things aren't falling apart. And I think that's why Lean is such a beautiful transformation tool to use within these companies.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, one thing that I've enjoyed over the course of my career is helping people at the
Mhm.
end of the day. And there's, the one common frustration people have in organizations is the amount of time
Yeah,
it takes for them to do things.
yeah,
And a lot of times, and if you again drill down on that, it has to do with processes. It's whatever they need to do in their organization to get to the, whatever outcome. And then often when I run a workshop or a session with a group of people, it's almost like a venting session.
yeah.
So the first few
You're a
hours is
therapist,
just
right? You really truly are.
it's just kind of you're in there just basically for the first couple of hours. Look, just open the can, just let it all out,
Yeah.
put it all out there. What's all your frustration? And fundamentally, it's down to our the procedures that we need to take just to get to something, to do something that seems so simple, but it
Mhm.
takes so long to do it. Either because the processes is just old, it's broken, or you've always done it that way, so we continue to do it that way.
Right.
And whether you put lean on this as a title or agile or whatever, it gives, I guess, people a reason to critique and change things.
Mhm.
And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy seeing people actually being able to challenge themselves, challenge how they do things in the workplace, and actually implement some good improvements as well.
Yeah. Before you and I came live here, we were talking about how our secular education doesn't really teach how to start a business, right? And right there, what you just said, it kind of gave me a flashback. When I went into my first BPM session, I had all the credentials in the world. I had taken all the classes, I had done all the certifications. I knew exactly what I was going to do from a technical standpoint. But when the
Yes,
venting session started, I realized that I didn't have the soft skills to deal with those venting sessions, to deal with the people, because that
yes,
part was never taught in a business setting, right?
yep.
And I think you're right. That part is so important because it's not just your technical capabilities. It's how do you deal with the people who are actually giving you the information, and how do you get the rest of the gaps that they're not giving you out of them.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the soft skills is something that I think a lot of education systems around the world are trying to find ways of putting that into their curriculum.
Mhm.
We talked about, one of my last courses I did at university was one where a lot of our grades were actually determined by the peers that you work with. So
Right.
we were put into a lot of project assignments
Mhm.
where we had to, or group assignments, I mean, so where you had to work with other people or other students, and then at the end of it, they were the ones that gave you your mark.
Yeah.
Now, once you've put in a situation like that, and you realize that it's not all about pleasing the lecturer, you suddenly
Mhm.
realize, oh well, I actually need to get along with these people,
Yeah.
and more importantly, I actually need to listen to these people.
Yeah.
So once you put in that situation, you realize actually it's not about my technical understanding of things now. It's actually about getting along with people, understanding them, empathizing with them,
Yeah.
and then realizing that actually, for me to be successful, I need them to be successful. And I
Mhm.
think that's the fundamental thing when you're doing, whether it's lean process improvements or any other kind of initiative. What makes it successful are the people,
Yeah.
and very much trying to understand what makes them tick in their case.
Yeah.
Um, for many years of my career, I did change management. I was a change manager on a number of different IT projects. And at the end of the day, you can say anything you like to kind of bring people across the board. But one of the things what I found anyway, was always the what's in it for me. You have to get
Mhm.
down to that individual level to think, well, put yourself in the shoes of them. What is it that will motivate them to do something? So if
Right.
you're doing process improvement, it's about, well, can I empathize with the frustration that you have in terms of what you're doing today, and play that back to you and go, I'm hearing this from you. Is that right? Cool. Now we're on the same page. What can we do about it to improve it?
Right.
So, yeah, again, you don't get necessarily taught these things at school, but it's so important. And again, when you're starting your own business, now
Yeah.
I need to put myself in the shoes of my customers and go, well, what is it that they want at the end of the day? Yes, I develop a solution, a software, but the software needs to be doing something for them. So, how do I craft my messaging to make sure that I'm ticking the boxes of what they actually want to achieve, not so much what I want to achieve. So that's it. That's an interesting dilemma, I think, constantly, especially with so many customers that I need to please.
Yeah, there's two skills that you mentioned, and I think they're probably the biggest key for leadership, for success, and surprisingly for business process, right? Empathy, first of all, I think is a skill that's not mentioned enough. That's a skill that doesn't matter if you're a C-level executive or you're a front level worker, you need to have, because you need to have empathy to be able to work with the customers, and you need to have empathy to deal with your employees as well. And I feel like that part is just not taught. And the second one, storytelling, right? It's
Yes.
so important because you even mentioned this earlier, and I totally agree with this. Decision making is all emotional, right? It's not a technical process. It's not a fact-driven process. It is an emotional process. The facts do help support that decision, but at the end of the day, the person has to like you to make that decision with you. So
Yep.
I want to ask you more specifically. This is specifically for me. I
Yep.
dealt a lot with change management as well. When you get into a sit down with a C-level executive and you're talking about change management, what are the hurdles that you seem to struggle with to get them to change their mind, to get them to make this massive decision, right? That has to be done.
Mm, mm. I think one of the things is I kind of want to quote the whole Simon Sinek model of things,
Mhm.
right? Which is that
Yeah.
before you start anything and try to sell anything, you need to try and understand the reasons and the purpose and the why,
Right.
right? So I always try to go back to that scenario of who am I going to be sitting at this board table with,
Mhm.
and why am I there, and why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
So trying to put yourself in their shoes and going, well, what is the agenda that they want at the end of the day?
Mhm.
What are they on the hook for? And the closer I can get to understanding that, and that is the empathy that comes into play, the closer I'll be in whatever I suggest as a way of improvement to get them across the line.
Yeah.
If I start with the what, and this is the
Oh, yeah.
solution, and just shove it down your throat,
Yeah.
they're not going to accept that. So I think very much it goes back to kind of you're putting yourself in the shoes of putting yourself in their shoes and going, well, what's of interest to them, and how
Mhm.
can we create a kind of win-win situation, whatever I'm doing, I guess.
That's beautiful. Okay. And that's how you've been able to overcome some of the hurdles with, especially with C-level executives.
Yeah, definitely. I think what that does is it puts you in a level of trust
Mhm.
with them that that you understand their problems
Right.
and their challenges, and you're generally there to help. Before it's funny. Like in my career, I've worked for a number of technology companies, and I've been able to grow consulting, I guess, as advisory services within these technology businesses. And what I found is that the big benefit of having the consulting advisory services in a technology business is that you're earning the right to talk to businesses at a different level than just putting a piece of tin or solution into their business. You're
Right.
earning the right, because you're able to understand them strategically, what they want to achieve. If you can get them into that conversation, and them trusting you that, okay, you actually understand their strategy and where they want to go, then,
Mhm.
oh, by the way, here are a couple of solutions or technologies that can help you along to enable that. That becomes a secondary conversation, but you've already convinced them that you're the right choice in
Right.
terms of a partner to take them on that journey. So that's where I found, building these kind of consulting businesses within technology businesses to be really successful is it's allowed us to kind of grow the technology part, but first let's earn the right to talk to them strategically first. Um,
Right.
yeah, no, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest hurdles, is just basically earning the right to talk to them, and
Yeah.
being at that table to, and how do you gain that trust? Um, Once you've been able to do that, then the rest sort of comes flowing quite easily.
In that same breath, we actually have a question from the audience that I think kind of flies right in here. I want to read it out to you. So this is Galvin Mandes. Galvin, thank you so much for the question. And he's asking, what are the subtle differences in how different cultures and countries you've approached work with Lean and Six Sigma?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think in a place like New Zealand, what you find here is that a lot of people do a lot of things. So what I mean by that is, in other countries I've worked in, there's a lot more specialization
Mhm.
in people's roles. So if you're a business analyst in a business, you will only do business analysis.
Yes.
If you're a project manager, you only do project management. But in a country like New Zealand, what I find is that a lot of there's a cultural element here where there's a can-do attitude of,
Yes.
you don't have to necessarily have that title to
Mhm.
be doing this role or that role. If there's a job to be done, you just do it,
Agree.
regardless of what your title is. So what I find is that kind of can-do attitude, but also the not having certain titles that are just about specialists. When you're doing something like lean, straight away you find yourself working with maybe a smaller set of people in terms of processes than when you're working with in other countries. So what I find in New Zealand is that you can actually just pursue a whole lean project with just like 5 people, but because those 5 people do so many different things, you can pretty much cover the whole end-to-end process.
Right.
In other countries I've worked in, it's kind of like, well, in order for me to understand the full end-to-end, I almost need to bring in a whole group of like 30, 40 people to make sure that I'm crossing that, I'm talking with all the various stakeholders there. So I think it's about understanding a little bit about what in terms of the people that needs to come into these kind of improvements. What do they do? Do you need to include more or less people? Understanding that kind of element. Some cultures, they're to the book in terms of what needs to be done. Others are a little bit more pragmatic. So it's trying to understand that and what's the best way of communicating. My where I'm originally from in Singapore, there's definitely more of a you need to kind of work through the ranks in order to get to the final decision makers. Other countries, it's a little bit more pragmatic, in terms of being able to get straight to a decision maker. So you have to kind of understand those kind of communication channels as well.
So
good question there, Gavin.
Does that just come with enough experience, with enough muscle memory, right? Because it sounds like you've done this for quite a time in a few different places. How do you research on these cultures? Do you research on the company before you go in? How do you get to that approach?
I think there's a couple of things. One is definitely you need to do the research of the company and try and speak. Normally, before I even start any engagement, I'll do a little bit of a discovery session, which is basically just me walking around the organization and just meeting people and just trying to understand how do things work, what has been successful in the past, what hasn't been successful in the past, why haven't they been successful in the past. Just trying to learn, I think, as much as I can about how that organization actually works before I actually try and do something, because the last thing I want to do is introduce new communication channels in an organization. If there's already communication channels that work, absolutely, I'll just leverage them. People in their work life have already got enough meetings, right? Adding more meetings into their calendars is not going to impress them. So if there's ways that I can sort of just adapt to their communication channels and go, look, I'm not going to create more meetings for you, but the meetings that you do have, can I just add another agenda item there, right? So I can cover, what I need to do in this project. And then that's not going to waste any more of your time. It's just going to be part of, existing meetings that you have. Now, you won't be able to make that judgment call unless you're actually understanding, okay, how does that business actually function? I think that's one part of it. The other part is, I guess, my upbringing. I've always traveled my whole life. Originally from Singapore, then moved to New Zealand. In my work life, been to Saudi Arabia, worked in the US as well. So I think just my upbringing has allowed me to adapt to different cultures and just understand people and not judge as well. It's like whenever I go to another different country, I always put my position that I'm a visitor, right? I'm not there to change anything. I'm there just to kind of listen and try and adapt as much as I can and bring to the table some new thoughts and new ideas that maybe they didn't think before. But I'm not there to force any change, and that's always just been my attitude in anything that I do, really.
So I do have to ask you this, right? We were also talking about this before you came on board. One of the biggest things that I teach people in my program now is how to follow their passion, right? How Simon Sinek says, start with why. That is, I think that is a part that's missing in all individuals, right? We don't follow our passions, we follow the money. So in your case, in the case of Boxfish, what pushed you to finally open up your own business? Right? You've been in director level positions for 20 years. Why go out on a limb? What was your passion?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I've always wanted to challenge myself, right? And it's funny, being a consultant, it's all about trying to challenge businesses and challenge people to get outside their comfort zone, and trying to do things and change. And I thought, it's the right time in my life that I put myself in a situation where, yeah, I'm not just working for corporates
Right.
anymore. I'm putting myself in a position where I need to grow as well. So this journey that I've been on over the last, 5, 6 months is very much, I've learned so much about business
Yeah.
and myself, to be honest.
Mhm.
And that's not something that I can ever pick up in any training course.
Right.
So I felt that, I think for anyone, you've got to be comfortable with where you are in your life. I think
Mhm.
when you make decisions like this, in hindsight, I'd like to say that, it would be great if I had done this a little bit earlier in my life when I've got less
Right.
dependencies on myself to actually start my own business, to be less risk. But
Mhm.
then there were other things happening in my life early on that I needed to deal with. So it's kind of like, you got to get in a position where, you've got the right support system around you, family wise, and all the rest, that they're there to support you.
Right.
And you're comfortable with an idea. And that was probably the other thing that I've always sort of felt like I lacked in the past in my career was, it's great that you want to start your own business, but what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I've always been a person that I'm comfortably selling an idea that I've actually done myself.
Mhm.
Because if you give me something else to sell, and I've never used that, done that, you can straight away tell that I'd be a terrible salesperson.
Right.
But the whole idea around business process management, again, one of the things as a practitioner that I always felt that I missed was having a tool, a software that I could use from beginning to
Mhm.
end. So I felt comfortable talking about business process management, about lean, and then now developing a software to enable this just seems like a natural next step to me. And I'm comfortable talking at both sides of the fence, either as a customer or practitioner, because that's my world. And now that I've also been working on technology, I can talk about the other side of the fence of being a vendor in terms of a software provider. So
Right.
these are fields that I'm very comfortable talking about. I feel passionate. There's something here that is missing in the market, because again, it's something that I've always felt has been missing in the way I'm doing things.
Right.
And I think within the current climate, we talked about this a little bit before the session as well, is that um, companies now need to accelerate big
Yeah.
time getting the ROI on a lot of these initiatives. And if we just follow the same traditional way of doing process improvement, you're
Mhm.
talking months away before you see anything. They
Right.
need a way to be able to accelerate the approach and get to the outcomes of the improvements a lot faster. And I find in your presentation was about digital transformations
Mhm.
in that last conference we spoke at, and that combination of technology and lean and process improvement into one. I think that's a formula for success there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's kind of my journey. Yeah.
It's funny because I do believe that companies for decades now who have been pushing away digital transformation due to COVID, due to the pandemic, have now somehow figured it out within a matter of weeks to months because they didn't have much of a choice. They had to do it. And I remember listening to your presentation. You're a big believer on technology being an enabler of creating an efficiency within organizations. So, what role do you think technology will play in this post-COVID world of ours, especially in digital transformation?
Oh, look, the fact of the matter is we're talking two different countries from two
Mhm.
different countries over, a virtual meeting here.
Right.
Not that, virtual meetings is not it's not a new thing. It's been around for ages, but certainly in the environment, whenever I work with clients, it was always face to face.
Yeah.
Whenever you do workshops, it was always face to face.
Yeah.
And I did challenge businesses in the past, going, well, with globalization and all the rest, you need to find a way where you're leveraging technology by way of communication,
Mhm.
fundamentally. But I think there wasn't really a sense of urgency before COVID-19, because people still went to the office, and and
Yeah.
and we would run workshops and all the rest that way. And what I find now is that this way of communication is not just a nice to have; it's a must have.
Mhm.
In order just to get things going. So without technology, first of all, we wouldn't be able to even communicate effectively.
Yeah.
So unless you're face to face, but so I think the way you're communicating is definitely dependent on technology. I think the way you share information is also the same thing as well. So when going back to our Boxfish platform, it's all about being able to document everything, analyze everything,
Yeah.
available 24/7 in a
Right.
system that you can go in and just start learning from.
Right.
So again, without technology, you wouldn't have an enabler to be able to do that. So I think definitely moving forward, you're going to see technology and being used more and more, because it's again, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. It makes things a lot faster,
Right.
especially when it comes to lean. There's a lot of data, right? So lean is not about process mapping. It's about data. Actually, it's data analytics in many ways,
Yeah.
because it's about capturing how much time do you take to do things, how much time of that is waste and valuated, non-valuated. All of these things you would normally have to do, manual calculations, but technology can just expedite that. It can do all those calculations for you, show it back to you. And the whole idea is that you still, as a human being, need to make fundamental decisions, but
Yes.
how you surface that data to you to make those decisions, that can all be done and facilitated by technology.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that being a, a critical element that's already here.
Yeah, I also think that because of this availability of data, technology has put such a big push behind transparency, right? And a lot of the organizations that I used to deal with before, they fear transparency because the layers, the bureaucracies, for some reason didn't want everybody in the company to know what was going on. But
Mm,
they fail to realize that transparency actually creates growth, right? It gets everybody rowing in the same direction. And when you do, you've got massive momentum. And I think that's where technology is enabling these companies to, if they're willing to be transparent, to break down silos, to
yes.
overtake their competition.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And I think a big part of that is not just data from within the business, but also data from outside of the business.
Yeah.
To be able to join how you do things with customer sentiments and the trends and customer behavior, have that
Yeah.
information as a data set within in your own internal data. It's a powerful thing, and I don't think companies have quite mastered that yet either. I
Yeah.
think there's still a bit of skepticism, and also a little bit of reservation in terms of opening themselves up for to surface that information.
Yeah.
But I think slowly we are getting there. And at the end of the day, there's so much data now that how do you know what is true and what is false as well? So technology is all about being able to tap into data, but there is
Yeah.
also technology for making sure that you actually cleanse the data, and
Yeah.
actually that you make sense of data as well. So I think that those elements, again, as a human being, it's hard for you to do that in a real fast way. I think that's
Right.
where technology ends up being another catalyst for, making sure that you're actually looking and seeing the right things as well, and you're measuring the right things as well.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you, for some of the people within the audience who are either business owners or thinking about opening up a business, I feel like there's this big, massive misconception, right? That in order for companies to grow and to scale up, they have to
Yes.
become this big, massive, inefficient machines, right? So how do you respond to that when a company wants to grow? How do you tell them to grow yet still be lean at the same time?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Very good question. I think to be honest with you, I think if I think before you even start thinking about your business, if we go back to the whole Simon Sinek thing again,
Yeah.
I think first of all you need to establish your reasons why, in terms of why you even want to start that business for,
Mhm.
and be very comfortable with that. Um, because the thing is, it's all about doing the right things rather than doing things right. I think in
Right.
many ways. So,
Yeah.
when you're going down and looking at processes, it tends to be about doing things right. But I think fundamentally, you just need to be you need to apply the whole, why is it that you want to do this business?
Mhm.
What is the voice of the customer that you're chasing? And being very clear, I think, that in that, having that strategic mind first. So I think um, if you establish that, then it'll be clear in terms of how do you do things, to
Mhm.
then relate back to that voice of the customer and go, well, are all the things that I'm doing contributing to that final outcome that you're trying to chase. So if you miss that step, and the reason why I bring this up is often I see companies missing that. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? When you talk about it, it's like, well, of
Yeah.
course I need to understand my customer and what I'm trying to achieve. But a lot of times of companies, especially that have been around for a while, they just completely forget about that.
Yeah.
And they focus too much on internal. So for a new startup, I think it's still it's critical that you have that end in mind first,
Right.
and then whatever you design in terms of your internal processes underneath, the
Mhm.
judgment of whether it's lean or not has to be whether it's contributing to that end result that you're chasing, that voice of the customer. And so long
Absolutely.
as you always have that in mind, and whenever you're doing something, you can see it contributing to that, then in itself it's that could be lean already. So I think um, now, I must admit, starting your own business, sometimes you don't have all that rigor as well.
Yeah.
You may not be able to afford, systems and all the rest. So, and you don't necessarily need to either. I think
Mhm.
start small, start
Right.
agile, and grow. You may have aggressive targets of growth, but I think it's important to also package it in incremental growth as well,
Right.
to make sure that every step of the way you're succeeding. Starting your own business is not always fun. It's not always joyful. You go through pretty dark times as well, and
Oh,
you're always
absolutely.
chasing that dollar at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you just need to always celebrate the small wins. I think
Mhm.
that's probably the big thing with me and my business partner is, we don't take things for granted. If we're able to sign up one customer, we'll have big celebrations about that.
Right.
It's all these little things that just keep you motivated all the way
Yeah.
through that journey. For many years I listened to a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts and all the rest, and some of the key traits, I guess, of all these entrepreneurs is that they're very positive,
Yeah.
and they're very resilient, and they're
Yeah.
all very persistent.
Yeah.
And these attributes, they're not external forces. It's very much within yourself.
Right.
And I think so long as you just keep these, keep positive and just keep pushing. If you're a believer of the outcome that you're trying to drive, just keep going, and finally you'll definitely succeed.
Yeah, no, I want to piggyback off of that. I completely believe that success is not a skill, it's a mindset. And
Mm,
one of the things that you said that is a big aha for anybody who's listening is a lot of businesses do start off with why, right? A lot of them have read Simon's book and they go from why to how to what, and they try to follow that, but they make it a one-time event. And you're right, it's not. It's a campaign, right? So one
yes,
of the things that I teach my clients is we kind of write down their why, we write down their core values, we have their 10-year plan, we then
mm,
break it down to 3 years, 1 year, quarterly. But the reason why we do it on this one sheet of paper is because when you create these 300 to 400 page binders of this massive mission statement and vision statement and how you're going to achieve it, that activity is great, but you're only focused and pumped up for that 5 to 7 hours that it takes for you to create
yes,
it, and then it's collecting dust on some executive's desk and nobody ever reads it, right?
yes.
So like you said, your business will go through a lot of dark times and you inherently will go through a lot of dark times. At that point in time, you need to be able to pull something out and take a look to say, why am I doing this, right? Why did I
Yes.
start this? Let me go back to the basics again and let me
Yes.
see why I wanted to do this and make it into a habit, which then becomes a campaign, which takes me out of my dark times. And yes, celebrate successes, man. I mean, it's so easy to lose track of gaining that one client, but that one client is what builds you up to 10, 20, 100, 200, whatever that big number is. It always starts with that one client.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And clients will buy off a trusted brand.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, so I think you have to make sure that with every client that you work with, yeah, you're treating them with utmost priority, um, and that you make a success of it, so that other customers can see that as well. When you're talking about the vision, mission, and all the rest, I thought it brings me back to when I managed teams,
Mhm.
when I worked for consulting businesses, and often we would go through a session in ourselves in terms of coming up with our sort of strategy, vision statement, and our purpose and all
Right.
the rest. And you're right, absolutely. If you don't keep going back to that and ingrain it in everything that you do, people will forget about it.
Yeah.
And we would have regular meetings, and
Mhm.
before I even start my meeting, I would basically put it out there and go, who can tell me the actual statement of our team vision?
Yeah.
Right. And, the first few times, no one can remember. In fact, I struggle to even remember word for word. So it was a good way of going, let's not forget about that hard work that we did going through our team session and coming up with that vision statement. Because, and to be honest, after a few months, I found that, okay, some people remembered it, other people didn't. Of those people that could remember it, we started losing how we could connect with it. And actually, about quite a few months later, we decided, okay, I think it might be time that we change it, right? Because it seemed to be great and relevant at the time, but the fact of the matter is we're all struggling to remember it, which means that we're not being able to kind of bring it down to earth in what we do, which means it's not quite aligned in what we do. So let's revisit that and actually come up with a new statement that is probably less wordy to begin with, but something that some of the key words resonate perfectly with what we do. So it's absolutely important, as you say, that you do keep revisiting these things, and it's not just a plaque on the wall. It's something that you have to ingrain in everything that you do in your team, because you want it to mean something to everyone. So no, it's vitally important.
Yeah, no,
and I like your one pager. I think companies can get too complex with these things sometimes. So just having something like that would be fantastic.
No, in that same breath, you're absolutely right. Right. When I first start working with companies, they all want to come up with the perfect mission statement, right? And they want to use these big words that articulate something that they don't really truly resonate with, but they want to impress themselves. They want to impress their teams. They want to impress their customers. But yeah, when we meet again the next quarter and the next quarter, it's so funny how these big words now start coming down to simple terms, but those simple terms resonate with you, right? They give you these aha moments and they wake you up. And like you said, we're living organisms, so are our businesses, right? So you might bypass your mission statement at a certain point in time, and it's imperative that you then change it, because if you're not growing, you're just moving backwards. So you have to revisit this. I absolutely agree with that.
And one of the clients I work with as well. So based on the vision, there are values as a business that you have that basically governs and guides how you achieve this vision or mission. And what I really liked about working with this client was that the language and the words of the values became a daily daily words that you would use. That and you call people out if they're not demonstrating those values as well. And so these words are very important, and it's important to get the right words as well, because they can become part of the daily workplace language. And that's kind of what you want it to be. So you don't want it to be a person at the top hammering down that you must do this. You kind of want these words to be the ones that guide behavior. So and if you believe in them, then you're more likely to demonstrate those behaviors. So words are important, and the way you use it in the workplace is important as well, and just to keep it alive.
Absolutely. Rowan, we got a couple of other questions. Do you mind if we jump to the audience real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we got Galvin again. He wants to know, should a company's vision be refreshed on a regular basis or be an infinite view, grander purpose? I think we kind of answered that, but I'm going to let you take it again.
Yeah, I think so a vision statement is probably something that you probably shouldn't change it too regularly. I think it's one of these things that ultimately is something that you're kind of heading towards. But I think revisiting it and reviewing it and bring it down into context is something that you constantly need to do. Ultimately, if you look at SpaceX, for example, their vision is to put humans on Mars. I don't think that will change for a while, but that is a vision statement. But how they go about doing it is probably, and how what that means to their company culture is something that will probably need to will continuously be revisited. So I think that reviewing and the applying it to your daily workplace is something that needs to always be done. But companies can change vision significantly if the whole business changes as well.
Absolutely. So I meet with my companies on a quarterly basis, and then we have an annual planning session that happens for 2 days, My rule is we don't change it in the quarterly session. We revisit
Yeah.
it, we talk about it, but the only time you're allowed to even touch it is in your annual planning session. And that puts such a heavy focus on, before you leave that planning session, you better flesh it out, right? It needs to be exactly what the company agrees with. And if
Yes.
everybody doesn't agree, we don't end the session. So that's the only time they're allowed to touch that statement.
Yep. 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 No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So we've got Melody. She wants to know, why did you name your company Boxfish?
um, so I guess there's a couple of reasons. Ultimately, when you look at a process, it's a whole bunch of boxes and arrows. So visually, a boxfish is a cube. It looks like a cube. So we thought that resonated with the fact that in a process, it's box. It comprises boxes and arrows. So that's one reason. But more of the reason is that boxfish as actual fish in itself is very agile. It's very small. It's a very small fish, and it pivots. And considering that it's a shape of a box, you'd think that it's quite slow to move, but it can actually pivot and move very, very fast. And we think in an environment where companies can be a small fish in a big pond and all the rest, having that sort of competitive edge and being able to pivot and move, depending on who's chasing you, or whether you're getting away from someone or you're trying getting ahead of people, is a nice kind of attribute for us to also grasp as well. So there's kind of that symbolic reason, I guess. Hopefully that kind of answers the question.
That is super cool. Ron, I have to ask you this before we start getting towards the end. In
Sure.
one of your presentations, I heard you talk about how the top goals for all organizations, or most organizations, will be to optimize and simplify processes.
Yes.
I highly believe in simplification. It's actually one of the key habits that I teach. It's my fundamental habit. So talk to me a little bit about why you think simplification is such a big necessity, especially right now.
To me, simplification is basically lean. It's basically getting rid of a lot of things that is unnecessary. So right now, it's all about for companies. A lot of companies, it's all about reducing cost.
Yeah.
And I think the big challenge I have with companies that are moving forward with a lot of cost initiatives is make sure you're removing cost in the right areas of your business. Make sure that you're removing it in the non-value adding areas of your business. So when you do simplify, you're basically focusing on the bare minimum steps required in your processes to achieve an outcome, but also link very much to that outcome. So anything else is basically waste. The research that I talked about, prioritize productivity efficiencies as one of the top strategic priorities. And to be honest, this was a piece of research last year in 2019,
Right.
and it was pre-COVID. And I think if anything, with COVID coming along, it's accelerated that now. So yes, companies were already planning for an economic market slowdown, but now it's come closer than probably what they expected before. So looking inside your business and going, how can we just get rid of waste? How can we simplify it to only, so our people are only doing those bare minimum things required to get that value to the customer? I think is absolutely necessary. Without that, potentially you've got a lot of costs that's in your business that is a result of a lot of that waste.
That makes sense. So Ron, we're getting towards the end. I just want to ask you, is there any tidbits, any knowledge nuggets that you want to leave our community with? I know if I was listening to this, I'd be very interested about helping people how to start up, or helping people be able to scale up their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at the end of the day, whether you're looking at process improvements, technology improvements, people and capability is absolutely important and critical. So that will never change, really. But I think the old age combination of processes, people, and technology, to me, and I'm biased, I guess, because I work in the technology and process field, but you always need that combination of three, and plus data, I think, which is becoming more and more relevant as well. So I think, technology, processes, people, data, in everything that, any kind of initiatives that you do, you're always trying to leverage and give focus to all four of those things. And generally you'll succeed. Where I've seen a lot of projects fail is because there's a lack of one or more of
Yeah.
those elements. If you work on a technology project and it's always about technology, you're not going to get people on board. The technology may not do what your processes in your businesses are there to do. So, you always need to make sure that you focus on that. But also, I think the last thing is probably just, again, now more than ever, you need to focus on the customer, and you need to focus
Oh
on
yeah.
exactly why is it that you exist as a business. What is it that you're trying to achieve for your customer? What's the value that you need to achieve for the customer? So before you even do anything else, start with that end in mind, I think, and then work backwards on that.
I do want to talk about a bridge right here. You're absolutely right. I think what's flying under the radar is data. And I think
Yes.
specifically what's flying under the radar is data about clients, data about their customers. So a lot of the companies that I deal with, they tend to see data as a new age thing that they don't believe in. They believe in the eye test. But if you look at any field, the companies that are leading are the ones that are ahead of their competitors when it comes to data. So
Yes.
I love pointing out Chick-fil-A as an example. It's a local restaurant here. I'm not sure if you
Yes.
guys have it there,
Yep.
but they figured out how to take their wait time for their clients and reduce it. I think it was by like 50%. And that came by looking at the data.
Yep.
So a fast food hamburger or chicken joint was able to use data to be able to get ahead of its customer. That should show you that any and every company out there, if you actually value data and if you use it the right way, you can gain such a competitive advantage. And I don't think that's caught up yet to the point that it needs to.
Yeah, it's the old age saying of, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to measure something, you need to have data at the end of the day. Otherwise, everything becomes too subjective.
Yeah.
The thing, you can't lie with data,
Yeah.
and it's a very objective thing. So absolutely, and whether you're comparing yourself with competitors or you're trying to understand more about the customers, or how your performance is within your business, data is the one thing that won't lie to you.
Yeah.
Obviously, data quality can be an issue,
Yeah.
but so long as you've got data, you've got something
Yeah.
objective to talk about and critique about as well. So absolutely, I think that's the one thing, and it's becoming more and more difficult with the many technologies out there that a business uses as well. So, how do you
Yeah.
consolidate from all of these different data sources into a place where you can then
Yeah.
interpret, analyze, and surface the kind of points that you then need to make decisions on,
Yeah.
because those decisions still require human beings
Yeah.
often. So it's about making sure that you're asking the right question, I
Mhm.
think, in many ways, and then follow that up by, where am I going to get the data to then make those decisions.
Yeah, I think you and I can probably hold an entire podcast about just data quality, data governance, and data visualization. That alone can be an entire 2 hour long conversation.
Look, I've got I've got a really good friend that
Yeah.
works purely in that space as
Right.
well, and we have a really good banter when it comes to data all the time, and it's something that, it's a necessity, but
Yeah.
I think you can't ignore it now. So great topic conversation for another time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Ron, before we go, can you let the audience know where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you? And what kind of services do you provide that they can reach out to you for?
Yeah, look, so our website is simply boxfish.global. That's our website there. You can also find me, Rowan Teh, on LinkedIn, as well as Boxfish in the LinkedIn site as well. So I'd say probably those are the main mechanisms for reaching out to me directly. But as a business, we're here to develop iBPM solutions. We've got our own intelligent business process management software. It helps organizations accelerate process improvement. So, you can use our software. It's a SaaS product. We do wraparound services to do with lean and process improvements as well.
Mhm.
But fundamentally, we're here to help businesses accelerate process improvements, accelerate lean, so you can get straight to that ROI, whether it's cost reduction or reducing complexity. We're all about trying to get you there faster.
That's perfect. Guys, I will make sure that I put a link to the website, the LinkedIn account, and I believe there's a YouTube channel as well. I'll go ahead and link to all of those in YouTube and also in the podcast website as well. Again, Rowan, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to bring you back again probably in about a month or so to kind of catch up on this post-COVID environment, hopefully by then.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Faisal. Really enjoyed it.
No, I appreciate it. And for anybody who's listening, if you guys are thinking about starting up a business or if you need any help, reach out to Rowan, reach out to my team, and let's get you guys started on your own path. Again, thank you so much for joining the Cultural Shift, and I'll see you next time.